They were brought to the field of Hndcp, and with the black Boeans to aid, they fought a fight that has never been set down in the newspapers. In response, many believe, to the fervent prayers of Father Denis, the enemy not only elected to fight in the open, but made a beautiful fight, as many weeping Irish mothers knew later. They gathered behind walls or flickered across the open in shouting masses, and were pot valiant in artillery. It was expedient to hold a large reserve and wait for the psychological moment that was being prepared by the shrieking shrapnel. Therefore the Mavericks lay down in open order on the brow of a hill to watch the play till their call should come. Father Denis, whose duty was in the rear to smooth the trouble of the wounded, had naturally managed to make his way to the foremost of his boys, and lay like a black porpoise at length on the grass. To him crawled Mulcahy, ash-grey, demanding absolution. "Wait till you're shot," said Father Denis sweetly. "There's a time for everything." Dan Grady chuckled as he blew for his 50th time into the breech of his speckless rifle. Mulcahy groaned and buried his head in his arms till a stray shot spoke like a snipe immediately above his head, and a general heave and tremor rippled the line. Other shots followed, and a few took effect, as a shriek or a grunt attested. The officers, who had been lying down with the men, rose and began to walk steadily up and down the front of their companies. This maneuver, executed, not for publication, but as a guarantee of good faith to soothe men, demands nerve. You must not hurry, you must not look nervous, though you know that you are a mark for every rifle within extreme range, and above all, if you are smitten, you must make as little noise as possible, and roll inward through the rifle files. It is at this hour, when the breeze brings the first salt whiff of the powder to noses rather cold at the tip, and the eye can quietly take in the appearance of each red casualty, that the strain on the nerves is strongest. Scotch regiments can endure for half a day and abate no whit of their zeal at the end. English regiments sometimes sulk under punishment, while the Irish, like the French, are apt to run forward by ones and twos, which is just as bad as running back. The truly wise commandment of high-strung troops allows them, in seasons of waiting, to hear the sound of their own voices uplifted in song. There is a legend of an English regiment that lay by its arms under fire chanting "Sam Hall," to the horror of its newly appointed and pious colonel. The Blackboneans, who were suffering more than the Mavericks, on a hill half a mile away, began presently to explain to all who cared to listen: "We'll sound the jubilee from the centre to the sea, and Ireland shall be free, says the Shan Van Vocht." "Sing, boys," said Father Denis softly. "It looks as if we cared for their Afghan peas." Dan Grady raised himself on his knees and opened his mouth in a song imparted to him, as to most of his comrades, in the strictest confidence by Mulcahy, that Mulcahy then lying limp and fainting on the grass, the chill fear of death upon him. Company after company caught the words which the I.A.A. say are to herald the general rising of Erin, and to breathe to the breath which, expected to those duly appointed to hear, is death. Wherefore they are printed in this place: "The Saxon in heaven's just balance is weighted, his doom, like Balthazar's, in death has been cast, and the hand of the avenger shall never be stayed, till his race, faith, and speech are dreamed of the past." They were heart-filling lines, and they ran with a swirl. The I.A.A. are better served by their pens than their petards. Dan clapped Mulcahy merrily on the back, asking him to sing up. The officers lay down again. There was no need to walk any more. Their men were soothing themselves thunderously thus: "Saint Mary in heaven has written the vow, that the land shall not rest till the heretic blood, from the babe at the breast to the hand at the plough, has rolled to the ocean like Shannon in flood." "I'll speak to you after it's all's over," said Father Denis authoritatively in Dan's ear. "What's the use of confessing to me when you do this foolishness? Dan, you've been playing with fire. I'll lay you more penance in a week than—" "Come along to purgatory with us, father dear. The Boneans are on the move. Let us go now." The regiment rose in a blast of the bugle as one man, but one man there was who rose more swiftly than all the others, for half an inch of a bayonet was in the fleshy part of his leg. "You've got to do it," said Dan grimly. "Do it decent, anyhow." And the roar of the rush drowned his words, for the rear companies thrust forward the first, still singing as they swung down the slope. "From the child at the breast to the hand of the plough shall roll to the ocean like Shannon in flood." They should have sung it in the face of England, not of the Afghans, who it impressed as much as it did the wild Irish yell. "They came down singing," said the unofficial report of the enemy borne from village to village the next day. "They continued to sing, and it was written that our men could not abide when they came. It is believed that there was magic in the aforesaid song." Dan and Horse Egan kept themselves in the neighborhood of Mulcahy. Twice the man would have bolted back in the confusion. Twice he was heaved, kicked, and shouldered back again into the unpaintable inferno of a hotly contested charge. At the end, the panic excess of his fear drove him into the madness beyond all human courage. His eyes staring at nothing, his mouth open and frothing, and breathing as one in a cold bath, he went forward demented, while Dan toiled after him. The charge checked at a high mud wall. It was Mulcahy who scrambled up tooth and nail and hurled down among the bayonets the amazed Afghan who barred his way. It was Mulcahy, keeping to the straight line of the rabid dog, who led a collection of ardent souls at a newly unmasked battery and flung himself on the muzzle of a gun as his companions danced among the gunners. It was Mulcahy who ran wildly on from the battery into the open plain where the enemy were retiring in sullen groups. His hands were empty, he had lost helmet and belt, and he was bleeding from a wound in the neck. Dan and Horse Egan, panting and distressed, had thrown themselves down on the ground by the captured guns when they noticed Mulcahy's charge. "Mad," said Horse Egan critically. "Mad with fear. He's going straight to his death, and shouting no use. Let him go. Watch now. If we fire, we'll hit him maybe." The last of the hurrying crowd of Afghans turned at the noise of the shod feet behind him, and shifted his knife ready to hand. This, he saw, was no time to take prisoners. Mulcahy tore on, sobbing. The straight-held blade went home through the defenseless breast, and the body pitched forward almost before a shot from Dan's rifle brought down the slayer, and still further hurried the Afghan retreat. The two Irishmen went out to bring in their dead. "He was given the point, and that was an easy death," said Horse Egan, viewing the corpse. "But would you have shot him, Danny, if he had lived?" "He didn't live, so there's no saying, but I doubt I would, because of the fun he gave us, let alone the beer. Hike up his legs, Horse, and we'll bring him in. Perhaps 'tis better this way." They bore the poor limp body to the mass of the regiment, lolling open-mouthed on their rifles. There was a general snigger when one of the younger subalterns said, "That was a good man." "Phew," said Horse Egan, when a burial party had taken over the burden. "I'm powerful dry. This reminds me that there'll be no more beer at all." "For why not?" said Dan, with a twinkle in his eye, as he stretched himself for a rest. "Are we not conspiring, and while we conspire, are we not entitled to free drinks? Sure as old Mother New York would not let her son's comrades perish of drought, if she could be reached at the end of a letter." "You're a genius," said Horse Egan. "Of course she will not. I wish this cruel war was over, and we get back to Canteen. Faith, the Commander-in-Chief ought to be hanged in his own little sword belt for making us work on water." The Mvrcks were generally of Horse Egan's opinion, so they made haste to get their work done as soon as possible, and their industry was rewarded by unexpected peace. "We can fight the sons of Adam," said the tribesman, "but we cannot fight the sons of Elbis, and this regiment never stays in one place. Let us therefore come in." They came in, and this regiment withdrew to conspire under the leadership of Dan Grady. Excellent as a subordinate, Dan failed altogether as a chief in command, possibly because he was too much swayed by the advice of the only man in the regiment who could manufacture more than one kind of handwriting. The same mail that bore to Mulcahy's mother in New York a letter from the colonel telling her how much valiantly her son had fought for the Queen, how assuredly he would have been recommended for the Victorian Cross had he survived, carried a communication signed, I grieve to say, by the same colonel and all the officers of the regiment, explaining their willingness to do anything which is contrary to the regulations and all kind of revolutions, if only a little money could be forwarded to cover incidental expenses. Dan Grady, Esquire, would receive funds, Vice Mulcahy, who was unwell at this present time of writing. Both letters were forwarded from New York to Teham Street, San Francisco, with marginal comments as brief as they were bitter. The third three read and looked at each other. Then the second conspirator, he who believed in joining hands with the practical branches, began to laugh, and, on recovering his gravity, said, "Gentlemen, I consider this to be a lesson to us. We're left again. Those cursed Irish have let us down. I knew they would, but," here he laughed afresh, I'd give considerable to know what was at the back of it all." His curiosity would have been satisfied had he seen Dan Grady, discredited regimental conspirator, trying to explain to his thirsty comrades in India the non-arrival of funds from New York. End of story.